from one point to the next point, the shortest way and the shortest distance is a straight line. Joseph did not have a straight line to the point where God had told him he was going to get. You know the story. He goes pit. That's step one. Then where did he go next? He went to what's called a house? Potiphar, yeah. And then he left from there and he went to what? To the prison. Am I right? And then he left there, then he went where? To the palace. He didn't go straight from his father's house to the palace, but he had to go a long way around. But when he got there, he was at home. He never suffered from that point on. And see, sometimes you got to understand that when you are heading toward what God has ordained you to be, in order for you to get there, to stay there, you got to go through some struggle. And that struggling is getting you ready to be able to stay at home. You can't stay at home with any kind of attitude. Because I'm going to tell you something. I believe Joseph, just like any of us, he was flesh. Will you agree with me? He was flesh. But I think during that time, God was shaping him, molding him, helping him to get ready to be able to stay at home when his brothers came. Because Joseph could have had that same mentality or vindictive or revengeful mindset, but he did not have that. See, God sometimes has to take us through some stuff in order to filter some things out of us, in order for us to grow. You can't get to where you and I can't get to where God wants us to be until we get ourselves in the right position and the right place with God. And when I start talking about that, I'm talking about the inner man. Your inner man has to be right. You know, I look at young preachers sometimes. Sometimes young preachers, after that first sermon, the first thing they want to do is pastor. They want pastor. But you can't pastor if you haven't been on the backside of the mountain and had some training. See, God had to send Moses, are you with me? Out from his house with his mother. Are you with me? And he sent him down to Pharaoh's house. But see, God had something greater for Moses. And he couldn't get it staying in Pharaoh's house. Are you with me? Yes, something transpired that was not something that we like to see. But remember, all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. Am I right? Now, he killed an Egyptian. And he buried him in the sand. And he thought nobody saw it. Huh? But a few days later, another man in Moses crossed paths. And the man said, "You gonna do me like you did the other Egyptian?" Moses came back and said, "You can rest assured your sin will find you out." And then Moses had to run. I'm running for my life. He had to run for his life. Huh? And he in on the backside of the mountain in a desert rocky place, tending to Jethro, his father-in-law's sheep. Are you with me? Stayed out there. He had to learn something. He had to learn who God was, number one. He didn't know who God was. No. Because when he saw that bush that was on fire, that was burning but yet not being consumed, he turned around and looked at it. Huh? And he began to have a conversation with God. And Moses said, "Now, Lord, when you telling me to go down there, But when I get down there, you know, they ain't gonna believe my report unless they know who sent me. Who do I tell them sent me? He said, now Moses, I'm gonna tell you who I am. You tell them I am, that I am. Huh? He had to get to know who God was. And so when he went down to Egypt, he wasn't able to go right in there and tell Pharaoh immediately to let God people go. He had to go several times. In fact, it took 10 plagues. Do you not know Moses was at a point where he did not believe that God was going to do what he was going to do? But he had to understand God has a way of getting us where we'll be able to allow our faith in him to become even stronger. Because now when they got down to the river, the Red Sea, got down to the Red Sea, the people were grumbling, right? They were grumbling. Am I right? But Moses did not allow them to get him out of his place. He knew who God was. What did he do? He turned into a top of God. He wasn't doubting God. He wasn't frustrated. But he told God about what? The problem. And God answered and said, Moses, don't worry. Let me paraphrase it. Don't worry. I got this under control. Now, here's what you do. You tell them people, they can look at them Pharisees, them Egyptians, their enemy, because they ain't gonna send them up. And Moses, that little stick, that rod you got in your hand, only thing you got to do is stretch it out. Now, I think the lesson said on last Sunday that the wind blew and caused the water, to pile up like a wall. And the children of Israel was able to walk on dry land. And when they got across, Pharaoh right there behind them. Then the wind stopped blowing and the water collapsed. And they all drowned. Now, let me get back here to where I need to get, because I'm just showing you that the long way around is the shortest way home. Believe it or not, you just can't go home any kind of way. Some of you sometimes when we're struggling through things, we wonder why we're suffering and why we got to go through this and that. God is just getting us ready. You can't go to heaven anyhow, anyway, anything in you. God got to sanctify us. He got to cleanse us, make us ready. And see, sometimes when people are suffering for a long period of time, people say, I wonder why they're suffering. Sometimes God got that person just there to try to help somebody who's walking around and not knowing who he is. People are always constantly on the move. Boom, 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 boom. Non-stop. Non-stop. On the move. Don't have time for anything. Don't appreciate or take things for granted. But then God has a way of slowing us down that we begin to realign our thought, refocus our mind on who is important. Not on they who is important, but who is important. God is important to you. Now, listen. He did that basically to Joseph. He put him in part of a house. Y'all know the story. As he got pit, they took him down to Egypt, and he was put in part of a house, and boy, serving down in part of a house. And here comes part of a wife. Ooh, he's a nice looking fella. Boy, just doing his thing. And she got to watch that, because you can be on your thing and the devil looking at you. Yeah. And so, as a result, hey, she saw her opportunity. She tried to launch up on him. She grabbed him, because when he left running, and he didn't have his clothes on. He left running, and he didn't have his clothes on. He was trying to escape, trying to do the right thing. And now, by him trying to do the right thing, he's going to be punished. Huh? Had to stay there several years, and then some. The baker and the butler, I believe, had dreams. Hmm? You see, sometimes God will put you there in some place that's unfavorable to help you to make a connection with somebody, to have a connection to somebody higher. And see, I'm gonna give you this. You be careful how you carry yourself when you walk around, folks. I don't care what they look like. I don't care where they are. You don't know who they're connected to, and they can be a blessing to you. Y'all better get me. I don't care if they look broke down, nasty, whatnot. You never know. They might get invitation to a ball and black tie fair and all of that. They were just nasty that day. You sold it. And they go home and get cleaned up. You don't know who they're connected to. You don't know. You don't know. And see, when you're a child of God, you got to be extremely careful, because the opportunity that God provides for you is one in which He worked it, and He worked it through people. He worked it through people. So that's the reason why you ought to be kind to everybody. That's the reason why you ought to treat people with hospitality. Huh? Yeah. I know people can get on your nerve, but we still are called to have a higher standard. Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And see, if you ain't careful, like the young preacher want to, after that first sermon, want to pastor, you get in a church and you will ruin yourself if God don't place you. What I mean by that is, you'll stop. You won't, if you get in the wrong place, and after you deal with people, if you ain't careful and God didn't put you there, you're going to want to stop preaching. And if God did call you to be a pastor, you were going to be reluctant to be one. Because, can I tell you the truth? Yes. His job is to feed the flock at all costs. And so what he has to do is sometimes he just has to tell God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not only that, but even you as a Christian, you are seeing some stuff that you didn't expect to happen to you. Am I right? Well, the Bible called those offenses, those problems. I know some of you have gone through where your family have done something that you thought they wouldn't do. Am I right? Yeah. You know, I'll say this. When I first started preaching, I've been a long time ago, my worst critics was not those on the outside. It was some of my family members. And I won't call the name because I don't know my kinfolk listen. I don't call the name. I don't call the name. But one of the persons that hurt me the most was one that was close to my heart. I ain't told nobody who that person is. I'm going to use is or was, so y'all don't know whether they're alive. I ain't going to tell you whether it's a he or she. But that person hurt my heart. I was young in the ministry, real young. In fact, it was, I ain't gonna say it there because some of my family members say, "Oh, I know he is now." But my point is, when your mind, when you know what God has promised you, and what God has called you to do, but God said this is going to transpire in your life. You're going to be the president of this company, or you're going to be the pastor of this church, and you know good and well you can't talk plain, you split verbs, and you see what I'm saying, don't have the background. But look, that's what God specializes in. Joseph, years later, he's in the king palace. There's a phantom going on. Them same 10 folks that did him wrong come marching watching in the cool. You know, it's something strange that when folks do you wrong, they tend to forget they've done you wrong. They tend to forget who you look like. Huh? When the enemy does you wrong, he don't care how you look. He forget. I done did my dirty work and I'm gone. I ain't gonna think nothing more about you. But that same one that you mistreat will be the very one that you will need to go back to for a leaning, helping hand. And see, that's why it gives you some type of peace there, that you don't have to be vengeful when folks have done something wrong to you. Now, listen, that don't happen overnight. That don't happen easy. It takes time for the Lord to shape and mold you. Because listen, I don't mean no harm. It used to be a time when you did something to me, I would do it right back to you. I want to seek a way to get back at you. I don't have a problem saying that. Because I know that the Lord has grown me. Now, I'm not like that now. You do me wrong. I've learned now, and as I continue to progress, and you ought to learn the same thing, that the battle does not belong to us. It belongs to who? To God, to the Lord. So stop going around with grudges. You know, I always say this, and I'm going and we're going to get more deeper into our study. If we want this church to be a spirit-filled church, we got to let go of grudges. Hello? Amen. Now listen, I said this. I know they hurt you, but remember something. You hurt somebody too. Now, let's get into more. Now, the Greek word that means offenses is what? You told me last week, Sister, Scoundrel. S-S, spell it for me. D-A? Scoundrel. All right, now, that's the Greek word. Now, what does it mean? It has 4 different definitions. The first one is a stumbling block. Can anybody give an example of a stumbling block? In other words, they impede your progress and your growth with others, or even in achieving things, because there are people that block. You got a good example? Give us a good example. Creating a stumbling block. You got one? Don't call no name. We don't want bad no blame.
But it's a big insurance company. That hiring manager is going to call the current manager that you're sitting under. And I have literally heard
the best of their ability, and they are reliable in doing it, you ought not to create a stumbling block, a hindrance, to keep people from progress. And there's a lot of people, even in the church, create stumbling blocks, try to keep people from progressing and growing in the Lord, in the sense that they sometimes get sarcasm with that. Oh, she thinks she's this and that. She ain't nothing. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Just because you were able to say the weapon, and it take you about 2 minutes and take them 10, they try to create a stumbling block. I'm just telling you how church folks are. I've been around them a long time. You got one? What you got, Sweet?
I got one. You tell a testimony, and they flip it over and around, and say you telling your business. You know, it's not your business. You're trying to help other people. What you going through, somebody else is going through. And the stumbling block is to stop that person, so that the more people don't hear the testimony. You will save more people. What business? You ain't got no business. You know, you should know what's business and what's not business. You know, just because you tell the testimony because your husband gone through cancer and all these people going through cancer. They need to see that other people have been where they've been and give them energy. It give them strength. It give them hope to hold on.
And when folks start talking that, then the person becomes reluctant to share. Huh? Yeah, and nobody wants to hear that. Well, somebody need, not about want, it's somebody need to hear. You ought to share your testimony as the Spirit of God leads you to share your testimony. Now, you ought not just share your testimony randomly. You ought to be under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. That when you minister, your ministry will be effective. Because every testimony you have is not to be shared for every occasion. And not to everybody. Now, even the fact, people will criticize you because they say, I don't hear you talking about nothing about what God has done for you or had any spiritual experiences with God. Now, if you go over into 2 Corinthians, around about chapter 12, you all know that part where Paul talked about my grace, where God tell Paul that my grace is sufficient and my strength is made perfect. Now, if you got to go back up and start looking at the text. If you start looking at the text, what you'll find out, there was a stumbling block that was being created for Paul. In the sense that people were saying Paul was not who he said. Well, that man ain't had no spiritual experiences. Spectators. People would sit back there and they would try to size you up based upon what they think they know about you. But see, a Christian has had many experiences with God, but they don't share all of them because all of them are not to be shared. But Paul was reluctant in sharing his personal spiritual experiences with congregation. Because now you read that text, you'll find out that Paul had been caught up into the third heaven. The third heaven is God dwelling with us. Paul never really did share it with it, but when the Spirit moved him to share that experience, he shared it. And then he started talking about that God gave him a thorn within his flesh to buffet him, to keep him in a straight place, a place where he needed to be. It made Paul to himself appear to be weak. And Paul said, I wanted that thing to be removed from me. But God would not let it be so. I prayed to him. Yeah, I know prayer work. I know how I know it works. Because when I was down there in the Philippian jail, prayer worked. Huh? At midnight, me and Silas prayed. And I tried prayer. But see, what Paul failed to realize sometimes, when we pray, God is not in But then when we get out of ourselves and start tuning in to what God has said, God has something great for us tonight. He's saying so many words. My grace is sufficient. Hey, look, I'm going to take it and go back to the 5th and 20th of Genesis, where Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God made it for what? My good. That thorn I thought meant evil, meant pain, mean to be problematic for me. But God gave me that thorn for my good. So that I will know his grace is sufficient. And his strength is made perfect where? In weakness. Not his strength is made perfect when I'm strong, but his strength is made perfect when I'm weak. See, we think a lot of times God is in the forefront of our life when we got everything going on well. But it's not. Because what we tend to do, we tend to get caught up in what we have and don't realize that what we have is not the one that brings us through and taking care of us. We become more self-reliant and we don't look to God like we should. But when necessity comes, distresses come, when infirmity shows up, when reproaches, amen, all surrounding. Reproaches when people speaking bad of you. When those things are around us, then we can see God step forth in our life. Because how do we make it through all of that? It's no other way except by the grace of God. Huh? How can you endure what you endure? It's because of the grace of God, not because of your strength. When you see families going through tragedy, where they lost several people at one time, but yet they still press on. I won't forget my good memory who's gone on to be with the Lord. Y'all remember Diane King? Lost her husband and her son. In about, 2 days? Something along that line? But you know what? Diane King would come in this church, and she would sit right there on the second or third pew. And she was singing the choir. Can I tell you what her song was? Her song was God specializes. And he can do. He can do whatever. He can make the impossible possible. She saw, that was her song. God specializes. Yeah. And so my point is, Joseph, he taken it a long way around because of the fact of a stumbling block, offense that his brother had brought about. But then, here we go. Another definition for scoundrel is something that causes one to fail. And that kind of tied in what you're talking about, the person blocking people winning a job. Something that causes one to fail. Our mouth often causes a lot of people to fail. Their old attitude, if you can't say anything good about a person, don't say anything at all. You know we don't follow that. You know we don't follow that. You ought to testify to those things you know, and those things you don't know, you ought not testify to them, right? You know, getting well, we don't know some things. We get right in conversation and say, well, you know what? I heard. Our mouth calls a lot of people. Our talking. We spread rumors. Gossip. Yeah. We sat on the course of nature. We set it at fire, like a wildfire, with that tongue. That tongue has caused more people to fail than anything else. Think about it. You know, the old saying, they have sticks and stones not see the cut. Sometimes the cut is deeper than the human eye. But now, another thing is about being an offense, a scandal, is something contrary to one expectation that brings disappointment. I got a question. If you haven't been disappointed, raise your hand. If you haven't been disappointed, raise your hand. I think everybody here been disappointed. Everybody here been offended. And you know, little kids often get offended when you promise them things, you set their expectation on things, and then you don't what? Deliver. We have to be careful what we said we were going to do. And I know that sometimes we have the utmost intention of doing, but then we're not able to do, or something get in the way. So we have to be very prayerful about what we said we're going to do. Because I know I let folks down. I know that. I've disappointed people. I will tell you I have. How I know that? You know how I know that? Because I've disappointed myself. If I disappointed myself, see, I have an expectation of myself, but see, I let myself down. It's contrary to the expectation sometimes. See, some of us had expectation of getting certain degrees. Hello? But we didn't do that. Or some of us had expectation of being a doctor or lawyer. You follow what I'm saying? You said, even some of you had expectation having some goals that you have set. Say, I'm going to save this amount of money. Come on, y'all know I'm telling the truth. Now, if you have disappointed yourself, don't you know you disappointed somebody else? Hello? The last thing, the definition is a trigger for a trap. Offense is a trigger for a trap. Some people deliberately offend you to try to trap you. Y'all believe that? People will set you up. They will offend you on purpose to try to get you out of your character. Hello? Y'all ain't gonna say it, man. I read my time is about up to 8:03. So when you're trying to say I got 7 minutes left? And time fast and you having fun. But listen, I'm going to say this, I'm going to let you go. It's not whether you're going to be offended. It's not about when you're going to be offended. But the question is, how do you respond when you are offended? This is what Jesus said in Luke. You got it in front of you, 17:1. Then he said to the disciple, it is impossible that offenses will come, but woe to him through whom they come. Offenses are going to come your way. I don't know when, don't know where. That's not important. Just know we're coming. Go ahead and grow up spiritually. to know they're coming. What you ought to do is you ought to learn how to handle those offenses. What do you do with it? Do you let those offenses weigh on your mind? Listen. Listen what Matthew chapter 24, verse 10 to 13 says. How many more minutes I got? How many? I got 5. Biggie, you've been my timekeeper for a long time. So I forgot about that. Thank you. It said, verse 10 to 13, listen, said, Matthew chapter 24. Then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many, because iniquity shall abound. The love of many shall what? Wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be what? Saved. Okay. Now, get this, and we're going to go. Jesus is telling us that many will be offended. You're going to be offended. And they shall betray you. How many of y'all been betrayed? Yeah. Huh? And see, that's the thing we got to understand. We're living in that day where we're going to be offended. And as a child of God, remember, the main reason why you're offended is because of the Christ that lives in you. It's not because of your position or your possession, but it's because of the indwelling presence of God within you. Satan don't give a dog about your possession. No, he don't care nothing about that. He can get all that. But what he cares about is that soul of yours. And if Christ lives within you, then Satan is out to wreak havoc in your life. Don't be offended. And even if they betray you, don't let that get next to you. And even though people are going to hate, and they hating y'all. They hating now more than ever. Cold love has dropped 100 degrees below zero. It is a cold world. Cold world. It's a cold world. And this sometimes tends to mess with some of us mentally and spiritually and emotionally. But listen, you have to understand that you don't belong to yourself, you belong to God. God saved you, and God is able to what? Keep you. If you allow him to keep you. He can't keep you if you're going to allow the offenses of people that have brought up on you to reign in your heart and in your mind. You can't get fixated on that. It'll consume you. Some folks are sick right now because they're constantly thinking about what somebody done to them. Now, it might not, you might think that's not true, but that's true. Dealing with health issues, dealing with mental issues, because they are all, they are addicted to addicted to what somebody done to them. They're carrying it around. You better let that heavy mess go. Didn't I call the teacher and say, lay aside every weight? Now, he didn't say, wait a minute. First thing he said, every weight. He didn't say sin first, but he said every weight. And then he said, it's sin. Huh? Those things that weigh you down, that keep you from being where God wants you to be, you got to let that mess go. What folks have done to you, you got to let it go. You got to put it in the right place. Because if you don't, that offense becomes a stumbling block for you. You can't go forward. You can't live in peace. You become, see, you about letting go, Vicky. I got what? I can't close thing out in a minute, Vicky. But it causes you to become a prisoner. You don't have liberty anymore. That freedom to go, nor the freedom to let things come in. You begin to become isolated. And you begin to become stagnated. And then you don't make any progress. afraid to let come in. We have no business being afraid. And when we hold grudges and when we have our mind thinking about what somebody done to us, that keep us from being who God wants us to be. How can I share anything about Jesus when I'm thinking about how you mistreated me? And see, the thing is, I ought to get off of that because I mistreated Jesus. Hello? Can I get a witness? And we still mistreat. Hello? Do we do everything the Lord tells us to do? No. Do we do something the Lord tells us not to do? Yes. So we repent. But guess what? He's willing to what? Forgive us. Willing to forgive. We must forgive one another. That's what Joseph did. I'm trying to close it out. I ain't got but 10 seconds probably. When you're offended, forgive. Forgive. When you forgive, you release the power of God to bring the good out of the worst. But if you hold on to it, the power of God can never do what it needs to do for you because you have given your mind, your thought to that particular item. And your mind thought is not on God. See, when I give it to God, then I say, God has power to handle it. God can what? Take care of it. Are you understand what I'm saying? And so I don't have to worry about that. I got better things to do than focus on what you've done to me. Amen. I got better things to do. God got better things for me. Don't get fixated. Don't get fixated. God got becoming greater and better for you. Past hurt, don't let them keep you from future blessings. Amen. Don't let it keep you from future blessings. I'm through now. I'm through. I'm going to end it because I'm going over time and my timekeeper ain't going to pay me for going over time. Are you going to pay me for going over time, Vicky? Go ahead and say no, Vicky. No, you ain't pay me. Now, but let me do say this real quickly.